Stepdad is lying. The voice rang through the silent courtroom like a bolt of lightning splitting the sky. Gasps rippled through the audience as all eyes darted to the little girl standing up from her chair. Her small hands were clenched into fists, her face red with frustration. The judge, a stern-looking woman with silver-rimmed glasses, turned sharply to the girl. "Young lady, you cannot interrupt." "He's lying," the girl cried again, her voice cracking with desperation. "He's not telling the truth, and I can prove it." Whispers broke out among the people seated in the courtroom. The prosecutor adjusted his tie, looking intrigued. The stepfather, a tall man in a navy suit, swallowed hard. His face twitched, but he quickly masked it with a forced look of innocence. The girl's mother, sitting beside her, grabbed her arm. "Enough, sweetheart. Sit down," she whispered, panic lacing her voice. But the girl pulled away, her bright blue eyes filled with unshed tears. "No, Mom. He's lying, and you don't even know it." The judge banged her gavel, demanding order, but the room buzzed with tension. The little girl took a shaky breath. And then, with everyone holding their breath, she revealed something that sent an icy chill through the courtroom. "He's the reason my dad is gone." Silence. Then, chaos. The summer air had been thick and heavy the day her life changed forever. The sound of birds chirping outside her window felt like a cruel joke because inside the house, everything was wrong. Her name was Lily, and she was only 10 years old. Just a few months ago, she had been a happy little girl with pigtails bouncing as she ran through the backyard with her dad. He would chase her around, calling her his little rocket because she was always bursting with energy. But now, her dad was gone, and she knew, deep in her heart, that her stepdad had something to do with it. "You're just imagining things," her mom had said when Lily told her that something didn't feel right. "David loves you, sweetie. He's trying to take care of us." Lily wanted to believe her. She really did. But she couldn't ignore the strange things that had been happening since her dad disappeared. Like the way David always seemed to be watching her, even when she wasn't looking. Or how he locked the basement door, even though no one had ever gone down there before. Or the whispers she heard late at night when she couldn't sleep. Most of all, she couldn't forget the last words her dad had ever said to her. "If anything happens to me, Lily, promise me you'll be brave." She hadn't understood then. But now, standing in the courtroom, she knew exactly what he meant. David had done something, and it was time for the world to know. The days leading up to the trial had been like a storm brewing in the distance. Lily had overheard her mom talking on the phone, her voice tight and worried. Something about money. Something about David not being who they thought he was. And then, the police came. Not to arrest David, but to ask questions. Her mother had been shaking when she told Lily to stay in her room, but Lily had pressed her ear to the door, listening as David smoothly explained everything away. "My wife's been under a lot of stress," he said with a soft chuckle. "Ever since her ex-husband disappeared, she's been paranoid. She thinks I had something to do with it, but that's just grief talking." Lily clenched her fists. She wanted to scream. It wasn't grief talking. It was the truth. And now, in front of the judge, she was finally getting the chance to say it. The moment she said those words, "He's the reason my dad is gone," the room exploded into a mix of shock, murmurs, and confusion. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Lily, that is a serious accusation." David laughed. It was the fakest laugh Lily had ever heard. "Judge, this is ridiculous. She's a child. She doesn't know what she's saying." Lily spun to face him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "I do know what I'm saying," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "And you know it too." David's face hardened for just a split second, but Lily caught it. She caught the flicker of panic in his eyes before he quickly masked it with a forced smile. The judge tapped her fingers on the desk. "Lily, if you have proof of something, you need to explain it now." Lily took a deep breath. This was it. But before she could speak, David slammed his hands on the table. "Enough!" His voice boomed across the courtroom. Everyone froze. His mask of calm shattered in an instant. His hands curled into fists, and his eyes burned with anger. And that was when Lily knew. She had just made a very dangerous man very, very angry. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the tension crackled like a live wire. The judge stared at David, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Reeves," she said slowly, "do you have something you'd like to say?" David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he looked like he had lost control. Lily swallowed. She could feel her mother shaking beside her. But she couldn't stop now. She had started something, and there was no going back. Lily's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the whispers in the courtroom. Her mother's grip on her arm tightened, but she didn't try to pull her back down this time. Maybe, for the first time, she was starting to wonder if Lily was right. David, her stepfather, sat frozen. His fists were still clenched on the table, his jaw locked in anger. His act was slipping. The judge, unmoving, studied him before shifting her gaze to Lily. "You said you have proof," she said carefully. "What proof do you have?" Lily swallowed hard. She had spent weeks trying to figure out how to make someone believe her. Adults never listen to kids, not really. They heard what they wanted to hear, and when something made them uncomfortable, they brushed it off. But she had something, and she knew, if she got it in front of the right people, David would never be able to lie his way out of it. She took a deep breath. "My dad left me a message." David's head snapped toward her so fast, it was like someone had yanked a rope around his neck. His face drained of color. Lily felt a flicker of satisfaction. She had his attention now. The judge raised a brow. "A message? What do you mean?" Lily clenched her fists to stop her hands from shaking. "I mean, I found something my dad left behind, and it proves David is lying." David shot up from his seat. "This is absurd," he barked, his voice cracking slightly. "She's a child. She doesn't know what she's talking about." The judge lifted a single hand. "Mr. Reeves, sit down." Now, David hesitated, his nostrils flaring. But he obeyed. Lily exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Now, she just had to explain everything. The night she found the message had been the scariest night of her life. It had been a little over 2 months since her dad had disappeared. At first, everyone acted like it wasn't a big deal. Maybe he just left, her mom had whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Some dads do that, you know. But Lily knew her dad. He would never leave her. Something had happened to him. And then there was David. At first, he had been nice to her, overly nice. He would ruffle her hair, tell her she was a smart little thing, and bring her gifts that felt wrong. Like he was trying to distract her. Like he was waiting for her to stop asking questions. But Lily didn't stop asking. And that was when the bad things started happening. Her favorite stuffed bear, the one her dad had given her, vanished from her bed. Her school books, neatly stacked the night before, were found ripped apart in the trash. And then, one night, she heard footsteps outside her room. Slow, heavy, pausing right outside her door. Lily had barely dared to breathe, clutching her blankets up to her chin. And then, she saw the shadow. A long, dark figure stretching under her door. It stood there, unmoving, watching. It felt like forever before the shadow finally disappeared down the hall. Lily didn't sleep at all that night. That was the night she decided she had to find something, anything, to prove David wasn't who he said he was. She had searched everywhere, but it wasn't until she snuck into the basement that she found it. The locked door had always made her curious. It had never been locked before David moved in. One night, when everyone was asleep, she stole her mom's bobby pin and picked the lock. It took longer than she thought, but finally, with a quiet click, the door creaked open. The basement smelled like dust and something else, something sour, like old sweat and rusted metal. Lily's stomach twisted. She took slow, careful steps down, her heart thudding in her ears. And then, in the farthest corner, behind an old wooden shelf, she found it. A small metal box. Her fingers trembled as she pried it open. Inside was a single flash drive, and taped to it was a note. A note written in her dad's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I didn't leave you. Be brave, Rocket. Find the truth." Lily's breath hitched. Her throat felt tight, like she had swallowed a rock. Her dad had left this. For her. Because he knew something was going to happen. And David had hidden it. Lily barely had time to process it before she heard footsteps. Heavy, coming down the basement stairs. David. Lily grabbed the flash drive and bolted, barely making it to her room before she heard the basement door slam shut. She had spent the next week trying to figure out what was on the drive. She didn't have a laptop, and she knew if she asked her mom for help, David would find out. But she had a friend. Jesse. Jesse lived 2 houses down. He was older, 13, and way better at computers than she was. She had taken the flash drive to him the very next day, her hands shaking as she passed it over. "I need to see what's on it," she whispered. "But you can't tell anyone. Not even my mom." Jesse's eyes widened, but he nodded. And what he found changed everything. Back in the courtroom, Lily sucked in a breath, trying to slow her racing heart. I found a flash drive, she said finally. It was my dad's. He hid it before he disappeared. David's expression flickered. That's a lie, he snapped. But there was fear in his eyes now. The judge frowned. Where is this flash drive? Lily turned her head, scanning the crowd. And then, her eyes locked onto someone at the very back of the courtroom. Jesse. He was gripping his mom's hand, but his face was set. Determined. He reached into his pocket. And slowly, he pulled out a small silver flash drive. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Lily turned back to David. And for the first time since she had known him, she saw something new in his eyes. Panic. The judge nodded toward the bailiff. Take that flash drive into evidence immediately. David slammed his hands on the table again. This is ridiculous. His voice cracked, his body stiff as he glared at Lily. She's just a kid. She's making this up. But his outburst only made him look worse. Lily stared him down. You're scared, she whispered. David flinched. And then, suddenly, he ran. Without a word, he bolted from his chair, shoving past people as he lunged toward the courtroom exit. Screams erupted as the bailiff jumped into action, but David was fast. Too fast. He was almost at the doors when, bang, a shot rang out, and David collapsed. The entire courtroom froze. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She turned, her wide eyes locking onto the person holding the gun, and her blood turned to ice. Because it wasn't a cop. It was her mother. Her hands trembled as she held the gun, tears streaming down her face. Lily stared in shock, the world spinning around her. And then, her mother whispered, her voice broken. He was never going to let us go. And then, everything went black. Lily's world faded into nothing. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was her mother, standing frozen, the gun slipping from her shaking hands. David lay on the courtroom floor, a pool of red spreading beneath him. People screamed. The judge banged her gavel. And then, everything blurred. When Lily opened her eyes, she wasn't in the courtroom anymore. She was lying on something soft, a bed. The ceiling above her was pale and unfamiliar. Where? She sat up too fast. Her head spun. Easy, sweetheart. Lily turned toward the voice. Her mother was sitting beside her, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. Mom. Lily's voice came out hoarse. Her mother let out a choked breath, reaching out to smooth Lily's hair. You passed out, baby. Lily swallowed. The events of the courtroom slammed back into her mind like a crashing wave. David. Her mother tensed. Lily's stomach twisted. Mom, what happened? A long silence. Her mother looked away, her hands shaking. They arrested me, she whispered finally. Lily's breath caught. Her mother laughed weakly, but there was no humor in it. I shot a man in front of a judge, honey. I don't know what I was thinking. Her voice cracked. I knew what he was. What he did. And when I saw him running, I knew we'd never be safe if I let him get away. Tears pricked Lily's eyes. She wanted to tell her mom that she understood, that she wasn't mad, but she was too scared to speak. A knock at the door made them both jump. A police officer stepped inside, his face unreadable. Behind him was a woman in a gray suit, her mother's lawyer. We need to talk, the lawyer said softly. Lily's mother stiffened. She turned to Lily, her eyes full of something fragile and broken. Give me a minute, sweetheart. Lily hesitated. Then, slowly, she slid off the hospital bed and stepped into the hallway. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and something else, something heavy, like worry hanging in the air. Lily wrapped her arms around herself. What was going to happen now? Lily. She turned toward the voice. Jesse was standing near the vending machine, his face full of concern. She ran to him without thinking. He caught her in a tight hug. You okay? No, she whispered. Jesse pulled back. I gave the flash drive to the police, he told her. They took it into evidence. Lily nodded numbly. Did you see what was on it? Jesse hesitated. Then he glanced around and leaned closer. I saw enough. Lily swallowed. Jesse's voice dropped to a whisper. It was a recording. Your dad recorded something before he disappeared. Lily's throat tightened. What did he say? Jesse looked down. I don't know everything. But he said David was dangerous. That if something happened to him, it wasn't an accident. He exhaled sharply. And Lily. There was a name on the file. Lily frowned. What name? Jesse hesitated again, then finally whispered it. And when Lily heard it, She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Because the name wasn't David's. It was someone else's. And it changed everything. The police station was cold. Lily sat on a metal chair, hugging her knees to her chest. After the hospital, everything had happened fast. Her mother had been taken into custody, and Lily had been sent here to answer questions. The detective across from her was kind but serious. Lily, I need you to think carefully. Did your father ever mention a man named Richard Calloway? The name sent a chill down her spine. It was the name from the flash drive. She hesitated. I don't know. The detective nodded slowly, writing something down. We believe Richard Calloway was working with David Reeves. Lily's stomach clenched. David wasn't working alone. She gripped the edge of the chair. Who is he? The detective sighed. We're still figuring that out. But we believe he's dangerous. He leaned forward. And Lily, if he's still out there, we need to find him. Lily's pulse pounded. David was gone. But the real danger? It was only just beginning. The police let Lily see her mom one last time before taking her away. Her mother cupped her face, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I love you, baby. Lily gripped her hands. Mom, what's going to happen? Her mother's smile was sad. I don't know. Tears burned Lily's eyes. I don't want to lose you too. Her mother's hands trembled. I won't let that happen. No matter what. Lily nodded, trying to be brave. She had lost her dad. She couldn't lose her mom too. But as her mother was led away, a terrible thought crept into Lily's mind. What if Richard Calloway was watching? What if he knew she was getting too close to the truth? What if he came for her next? Lily clenched her fists. No, she wasn't going to hide. She was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took. And that was when she made the most dangerous decision of her life. She was going to find Richard Calloway, and she was going to make him pay. Lily knew she had made a dangerous decision the moment the words left her mouth. I have to find Richard Calloway. Jessie stared at her like she had lost her mind. Lily, are you crazy? This guy, whoever he is, he's dangerous. The police should be the ones looking for him, not you. Lily clenched her fists. The police don't care. They didn't listen when my dad went missing, and they let David get away with lying for months. Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to keep going. If I don't do something, no one will. Jessie ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear on his face. Okay, let's say we do this. How are we even supposed to find him? It's not like we can just Google his address. Lily hesitated. That part, she hadn't figured out yet. But then, a memory flashed in her mind. David, talking on the phone late at night. His voice sharp, tense. Relax, he had said. Calloway said he'd take care of it. At the time, Lily hadn't understood what it meant. But now, her pulse quickened. David knew him, she said slowly. He talked to him. Jessie frowned. So maybe David left something behind. A number, an address, something. Jessie exhaled, shaking his head. You want to break into David's house, don't you? Lily looked at him. Jessie groaned. Unbelievable. David's house felt like a haunted place now. The porch light was still on, glowing dimly in the evening air, but everything else was dark. Quiet. Too quiet. Jessie shifted beside her. Are you sure no one's home? Lily nodded. David's in the hospital. My mom is in jail. No one's been back here since the trial. Jessie sighed. I can't believe I let you talk me into this. Lily ignored him and reached for the doorknob. She had grabbed David's keys before leaving the courtroom. The police would come to search the house eventually, but she needed to get in first. Her hands trembled as she slid the key into the lock. Click. The door creaked open. A shiver ran down Lily's spine as they stepped inside. The house smelled the same, like David's cologne and fresh wood polish. But without him there, it felt wrong. Empty, like a place that was waiting for something bad to happen. Jessie nudged her. Where do we start? Lily hesitated. Then she pointed to David's office. That's where he kept his important stuff. They moved carefully, stepping over the creaky floorboards. Lily's heart pounded as she reached for the office door. It was locked. Of course. Jessie sighed. Do you have the key? Lily shook her head. Jessie rubbed his face. You've got to be kidding me. Lily bit her lip. You know how to pick locks, right? Jessie threw up his hands. Why does everyone assume that? Lily stared at him. He groaned. Fine. Jessie pulled a paperclip from his pocket, straightened it, and got to work. Lily held her breath. Click. The door swung open. The office was exactly how she remembered it. Dark wooden desk, neat stacks of paper, bookshelves lined with things she wasn't allowed to touch. But they weren't here for books. They were here for secrets. Jessie started searching through the desk drawers while Lily moved toward the filing cabinet. She yanked the drawers open, flipping through folders. Bills, receipts, legal documents. Nothing. Until Lily's fingers stopped on a thin black notebook tucked behind the rest of the papers. She pulled it out, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" Jessie asked. Lily flipped it open. The pages were filled with names, numbers, and notes scribbled in David's messy handwriting. And on the very last page, she saw it. Richard Calloway, 902, Silvercrest Road. Lily's breath caught. "We found him," she whispered. Jessie looked over her shoulder. His eyes widened. "Oh man," he muttered. "This is a really bad idea." Lily clenched the notebook. Bad idea or not, they had no choice. They were going to Silvercrest Road. It took an hour to bike there. Silvercrest Road was on the far side of town, past the abandoned factories and empty train yards. It wasn't the kind of place people visited unless they had a reason. And Richard Calloway definitely had a reason. Lily's stomach twisted as they turned onto the street. Most of the houses were boarded up. Dark. Lifeless. Except one. 902, Silvercrest Road. The house was small, but the lights were on. A car sat in the driveway, its engine still warm. He was here. Jessie grabbed her arm. "Lily, we need to think about this." But Lily's blood was pounding too hard. This man had something to do with her dad's disappearance. And she needed to know why. Before Jessie could stop her, she marched up to the house. The porch creaked under her weight as she reached the door. And then, the door swung open. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, gray hair, cold, dark eyes. He looked down at her and smiled. "Lily," he said smoothly, "I've been expecting you." Lily's blood ran cold. She tried to step back, but Richard Calloway's hand shot out, and the world went dark. Lily's world spun as everything went black. Her body felt weightless, as if she were floating in an ocean of darkness. But then pain, a dull, throbbing ache at the back of her head. She tried to move, but her limbs felt sluggish. And then she heard a voice. "I told you she'd come." It wasn't David's voice. It was deeper, colder. Lily's breath hitched as reality slammed back into her. Her eyes snapped open. She was in a dimly lit room, the air thick with dust. The walls were bare, the floor hard beneath her. A single bulb flickered above, casting eerie shadows. She tried to move, only to realize her hands were bound behind her back. Panic surged through her chest. Where was Jessie? A movement caught her eye. Across the room, a man stood leaning against an old wooden table. Richard Calloway. He looked exactly the way she had imagined him. Tall, with sharp features and a cruel smirk that made her skin crawl. Lily swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "You're awake," Richard said smoothly. "Good. I was starting to think you'd missed the fun." Lily glared at him. "Where's Jessie?" Richard chuckled. "Your little friend? He got lucky." He tilted his head. "But you just had to come knocking on my door, didn't you?" Lily's heart pounded. "Where is my dad?" she demanded. Richard's smile didn't fade. That is the real question, isn't it?" He crouched in front of her, his dark eyes scanning her face. "You look just like him, you know. Same fire. Same stubbornness." Lily clenched her jaw. Richard's smile widened. "But here's the thing, kiddo, stubbornness gets people killed." Lily's stomach twisted, but she didn't let him see her fear. "You hurt him, didn't you?" Richard sighed dramatically, standing up. "Hurt is such a strong word. Your father made some unfortunate decisions. Decisions that got him into a situation he couldn't get out of." Lily's breath quickened. Her father was alive. Or he had been. She needed answers. Fast. "David was working for you," she said carefully. "He was scared of you." Richard laughed. "Scared?" He shook his head. "David was a fool. A fool who thought he could outsmart me." Lily's pulse raced. "What did my dad do?" she asked. Richard's eyes darkened. "Your father found out something he wasn't supposed to. And instead of keeping quiet, he decided to play hero." He sighed. "You see, Lily, heroes don't last very long in the real world." Lily's fingers curled into fists behind her back. "My dad wouldn't just disappear," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "He left me a message." Richard stilled, and for the first time, Lily saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes. A crack in his confidence. "You're lying," he said, his voice sharp. Lily smirked, despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Am I?" Richard clenched his jaw. And then, without warning, the lights cut out. A loud crash echoed through the room. Lily barely had time to react before the door burst open, and Jesse came flying in. "Lily, move," he yelled. Before she could even think, Jesse swung a heavy metal pipe at Richard's head. Richard barely dodged in time, but it was enough of a distraction. Lily scrambled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her wrists. "Run!" Jesse shouted. Lily didn't hesitate. She bolted. Her feet pounded against the cold floor as she tore down the dark hallway. Behind her, she heard Richard cursing, the sound of a struggle. Jesse grunted in pain. Lily skidded to a stop. She turned, just in time to see Richard shove Jesse against the wall. "No!" Lily cried. Richard grabbed Jesse by the collar, lifting him slightly. "You should have stayed out of this, boy." Jesse struggled, gasping for air. Lily's mind raced. She had one shot. Without thinking, she lunged for the table in the corner, grabbing the first thing she could find, a gun. Her hands shook as she pointed it at Richard. "Let him go." Richard turned slowly. His expression shifted, first to amusement, then to curiosity. "Now this is interesting," he mused. "You willing to pull that trigger, Rocket?" Lily's stomach clenched. He was testing her. She had never held a gun before. Her fingers trembled against the cool metal. Richard smirked. "Go ahead. Do it." Jesse gasped, struggling harder. Lily's heart pounded. And then, bang! The gun fired. The sound was deafening. Lily's hands jerked from the recoil, her ears ringing. Richard staggered back, his grip on Jesse loosening. For a second, Lily thought she had actually shot him. But then, she realized. She had missed. Richard's face twisted with rage. "You little..." Before he could finish, Jesse elbowed him hard in the ribs. Richard groaned, stumbling backward. That was their chance. "Run!" Jesse yelled. This time, Lily didn't stop. She grabbed Jesse's arm, yanking him forward. Together, they sprinted out of the building. The night air hit Lily like a punch to the chest. They didn't stop running. Not until they reached the main road, their lungs burning. Jesse bent over, panting. "Lily, you shot at him." Lily stared down at the gun in her hands, her fingers still trembling. "I had to." Jesse shook his head. "We need to tell the police." Lily hesitated. The police hadn't helped before. But now they had something real. Richard Calloway was dangerous, and he wasn't going to stop. Lily tightened her grip on the gun. "Not yet," she said softly. Jesse frowned. "What do you mean, not yet?" Lily looked back toward the dark street, her heart pounding. "We're not done." Because Richard Calloway wasn't just some criminal. He knew what happened to her dad, and she wasn't stopping until she found out the truth, no matter what it took. Lily and Jesse hid behind a dumpster in an empty parking lot, their chests heaving, lungs burning from running. The gun was still in Lily's trembling hands, her fingers gripping the cold metal so tightly they ached. Jesse wiped sweat from his forehead, his face pale under the flickering streetlight. "Okay," he breathed. "I think we lost him." Lily wasn't so sure. Richard Calloway was a predator, the kind of man who didn't just let people walk away. He would come for them, and he would make sure they never found their way back. Jesse turned to her. "Lily, we need to go to the police." Lily swallowed hard, still staring at the gun. She wanted to believe the police could help, but they had ignored her when her dad disappeared. They had believed David's lies. What if they didn't listen this time either? What if Richard had people inside the police department? Jesse nudged her. "Lily, say something." She inhaled shakily. "We can't go to the police." "Not yet." Jesse threw up his hands. "Are you serious?" Lily nodded. "Think about it. If Richard really had something to do with my dad's disappearance, he's not just some random criminal. He's powerful. He's connected. If we go to the wrong cop, we could be handing ourselves right to him." Jesse groaned, rubbing his face. "Okay, fine. Then what do we do?" Lily's mind raced. "We need proof." Jesse blinked. "We literally just shot at a man who kidnapped you. Isn't that proof enough?" Lily shook her head. "No. We need to find out what my dad knew. That's the only way we can take him down for good." Jesse sighed. "Okay, and how do we do that?" Lily bit her lip, and then she remembered something. "The flash drive," she whispered. Jesse frowned. "What about it?" Lily sat up straighter. "The flash drive had 2 files. One of them was my dad's message to me, but there was another file. One Jesse didn't get to see before we gave it to the police." Jesse's eyes widened. "You think the other file has answers?" Lily nodded. "I know it does." Jesse exhaled. "Okay, so how do we get it back?" Lily hesitated. And then, the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She knew someone who could help. someone she wasn't sure she could trust. But they had no choice. "We need to break into the police station," she said. Jesse's jaw dropped. "Excuse me, what?" Lily looked at him, determination burning in her eyes. "We have to steal the flash drive." Breaking into a police station sounded impossible, and maybe it was. But Lily knew one thing. If they wanted to survive, if they wanted to win, they had to do things no one else would dare to do. Which was why, an hour later, she and Jesse found themselves outside the town's police department, hidden behind a row of parked cars. Jesse ran a hand through his hair. "I cannot believe I let you talk me into this." Lily ignored him. She was staring at the side of the building, where the evidence room was located. She turned to Jesse. "Remember Officer Taylor?" Jesse frowned. "The one who took the flash drive?" Lily nodded. "He's not bad. He was the only cop who ever acted like he believed me. If we can distract him, we can sneak into the evidence room and get the drive back." Jesse groaned. "You make it sound so simple." Lily turned toward the entrance. "Wait here." Jesse grabbed her wrist. "Lily, what are you doing?" She looked at him. "I'm going to talk to Officer Taylor." Jesse shook his head. "You just said we can't trust the cops." Lily nodded. "We can't, but we can use them." Before Jesse could argue, she stepped out of the shadows and marched toward the entrance. The station was quiet at this time of night. Only a few officers lingered near the front desk. And there he was, Officer Taylor. Lily took a deep breath and walked straight up to him. He looked up, startled. "Lily," his brows furrowed. "What are you doing here?" Lily forced herself to look scared. I think someone's following me." Officer Taylor straightened. "What? Where?" Lily glanced over her shoulder. "I don't know. I saw a man near my house. He was just standing there, watching." Taylor's expression darkened. "Describe him." Lily faked a shudder. "Tall, gray hair. He looked dangerous." Officer Taylor cursed under his breath. "Wait here. I'm getting back up." The second he turned his back, Lily moved. She ducked past the front desk and slipped into the hallway, her heart pounding. The evidence room was just ahead. Jesse was already there, crouched by the door. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Did it work?" Lily nodded. "Taylor's distracted. Let's move." Jesse pulled out a paperclip. "I really need to stop hanging out with you," he muttered as he picked the lock. Click. The door swung open. They slipped inside. The evidence room was filled with shelves, rows and rows of boxes containing files, weapons, and other confiscated items. Lily's eyes scanned the labels. And then, there, a small box labeled Case Number 8490, Reeves, David. Jesse grabbed it and yanked it open. Inside, among papers and folders, was the flash drive. Lily's breath caught. "We got it," Jesse whispered. Lily reached for it, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. And then, a voice. "Freeze." Lily's stomach dropped. They turned slowly. Officer Taylor stood in the doorway, his gun drawn. His eyes were wide with shock and betrayal. "Lily," he said, his voice sharp. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Lily's heart pounded in her chest. She had to think. She had to act fast. But before she could say a word, a loud bang shattered the silence. The window behind them exploded. Jesse yelled. Glass rained down around them, and suddenly, a figure in black burst through the broken window. Lily barely had time to register what was happening before the person grabbed her and yanked her backward. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her again was Officer Taylor's stunned face. And then, she was gone. Lily's world spun as she was yanked through the shattered window, glass scraping her arms. The wind roared in her ears. A strong arm locked around her waist, pulling her through the air. She landed hard, her breath knocked from her lungs. Gravel scraped against her skin. Before she could even process what had happened, she was moving again. The person, whoever had grabbed her, was running. Fast. Lily struggled, twisting in their grip. "Let me go," she shouted, kicking wildly. No response. The figure, dressed in all black, tightened their grip and kept running, cutting through the alley behind the police station. Lily's heart pounded in terror. This wasn't Richard Calloway. This person was smaller, leaner, not as old. But that didn't make them any less dangerous. Lily, her head whipped around just in time to see Jesse bolting out of the police station, eyes wild with panic. Officer Taylor was right behind him, shouting orders into his radio. "Lily!" Jesse screamed again, chasing after them. The person gripping her growled under their breath. Then, they threw something. A small, dark object landed on the pavement. and erupted into thick, choking smoke. Jesse skidded to a stop, coughing. Lily screamed as she was dragged deeper into the night. They ran for what felt like forever. Lily's lungs burned. Her legs ached from struggling. Then, a door slammed shut. Silence. Lily gasped, trying to suck in air. She twisted wildly, trying to get away, but her captor shoved her against a wall. Stop struggling. The voice was sharp. Female. Lily froze. The grip on her loosened. She staggered back, sucking in a breath. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She was in some kind of abandoned warehouse. Moonlight streamed through broken windows, casting long shadows. Her captor stepped into the dim light, and Lily's eyes widened in shock. It was a girl. She looked about 16, maybe 17. Her dark hoodie was torn at the sleeves, her jeans ripped and dirty. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, glared at Lily like she was an annoying problem that needed solving. Lily's breath caught. She knew this girl. You. Lily's voice wavered. You were in the courtroom. The girl didn't react. Lily's stomach twisted. She remembered now. She had seen this girl before, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom when David's trial started. She had been there, watching everything unfold. Who was she? Lily swallowed hard. Who are you? The girl folded her arms. Someone who just saved your life. Lily clenched her fists. You kidnapped me. The girl rolled her eyes. Yeah? Well, if I hadn't, you'd be rotting in a jail cell right now. Lily's pulse raced. What are you talking about? The girl sighed. That cop? Taylor? He's dirty. Lily's blood ran cold. No, he is, the girl interrupted. I've been watching him. He works for Calloway. Lily's stomach twisted. Officer Taylor had been the only cop who had ever acted like he believed her. But what if it was all an act? What if he had been watching her this entire time? The girl stepped forward. You want to take down Richard Calloway? Lily hesitated. Yes. The girl smirked. Then you're going to need my help. Lily stared at her. Something about the way she said it sent a shiver down her spine. Because this girl, whoever she was, wasn't just offering help. She had a plan. And Lily had a feeling it was going to change everything. Jesse was losing his mind. He had run through half the city, trying to figure out where Lily had been taken. He had called her name, begged her to answer. But she was gone. And Officer Taylor? He had let it happen. The moment the smoke bomb had gone off, Taylor had stopped chasing. He had backed away, yelling into his radio, pretending to do his job. But Jesse had seen the way his eyes had flickered, the way he had looked at the smoke and just stood there. And Jesse knew. Taylor was working with them. Jesse clenched his fists. He needed to find Lily, before it was too late. Back in the warehouse, Lily crossed her arms. Tell me who you are. The girl smirked. Names don't matter. Lily scowled. They do to me. The girl rolled her eyes. Fine. Name's Riley. Lily frowned. Riley what? Riley's expression darkened. Just Riley. Lily hesitated. Something about the way she said it. It felt like a lie. Riley sighed. Look, kid. You're in deep, whether you like it or not. Calloway will come for you. She tilted her head. Unless you stop him first. Lily squared her shoulders. That's what I want to do. Riley smirked. Then it's a good thing I already have a plan. Lily's eyes widened. Riley stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I know where Calloway's hiding. Lily's breath caught. Where? Riley's smirk grew wider. Let's just say, he has a little secret. Lily swallowed hard. What kind of secret? Riley's eyes gleamed. The kind that can destroy everything. Lily's pulse raced. This was it. This was her chance. She had come this far. And now, she was about to uncover the biggest truth of all. But as she stood there, staring at Riley, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far bigger than she could ever imagine. And she had no idea if she was going to make it out alive. Lily's mind raced. Riley stood in front of her, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips like she knew something Lily didn't. And maybe she did. Maybe she knew everything. Lily swallowed hard. If you know where Calloway is, why haven't you told the police? Riley let out a short, bitter laugh. You think the police don't already know? She shook her head. Wake up, kid. Calloway owns half of them. Lily's stomach twisted. She wanted to argue. She wanted to believe that someone in the police department could be trusted. But Officer Taylor had proved otherwise. Riley took a step closer. Look, I don't have time to hold your hand. If you want to stop Calloway, you're either in, her eyes darkened, or you can walk away and pretend none of this is happening. Lily didn't hesitate. I'm in. Riley's smirk returned. That's what I thought. She turned and grabbed something from a nearby table, a crumpled piece of paper. She tossed it to Lily. Lily unfolded it. At first, it looked like a map of the city, but there were markings, red circles drawn around a specific area. Lily frowned. What is this? Calloway's safe house, Riley said. It's where he goes when things get messy. And after what you pulled at the police station. She grinned. I'm guessing things just got real messy. Lily traced her finger over the map. The location was on the outskirts of town, near the old shipping docks. Why would he hide there? Riley leaned against the wall. Because no one questions what happens near the docks. It's the kind of place where people disappear. Lily's throat tightened. She clenched her fists. Then that's where we go. Riley raised an eyebrow. Just like that. Lily met her gaze. Just like that. Riley smirked. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. Lily shoved the map into her pocket. When do we leave? Riley glanced at her watch. Now. Jesse was panicking. It had been hours since Lily disappeared. He had searched everywhere, but it was like she had vanished into thin air. And the worst part? Officer Taylor had done nothing. The moment Lily was taken, he had told Jesse to stay out of it. When Jesse demanded answers, Taylor just gave him a warning look and walked away. That was when Jesse knew. Lily was on her own. And if she was on her own, that meant Jesse had to find her himself. His only lead. The one name Lily had been chasing. Richard Calloway. Jesse pulled out his phone and searched the name. Nothing. No records. No addresses. It was like Calloway didn't exist. But Jesse wasn't giving up that easily. He remembered something Lily had told him before, something about David's notebook. David had written down Calloway's address. Jesse dug through his backpack and pulled out the notebook they had taken from David's house. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. And then, there it was. 902, Silvercrest Road. Jesse's heart pounded. That was his lead. He grabbed his bike and took off. He had no idea what he was walking into. But one thing was certain. He wasn't letting Lily face it alone. The air near the docks was thick with fog, rolling in from the water like ghostly fingers reaching for the land. Lily and Riley crouched behind an old shipping crate, staring at the rundown building ahead. It wasn't much, just an old warehouse with a flickering light outside. But Riley was certain. Calloway's in there, she whispered. Lily's heart pounded. This was it. She was finally going to face the man who had taken everything from her. Riley nudged her. You ready? Lily took a deep breath. Then she nodded. They moved quickly, darting between crates and stacks of old cargo. The closer they got, the more Lily's nerves buzzed. She wasn't scared. She was angry. She was ready. Riley reached the side door and pulled out a small knife. With a quiet click, she picked the lock. Lily blinked. Where did you learn how to do that? Riley smirked. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. The door creaked open. Lily slipped inside, Riley right behind her. The inside of the warehouse was dimly lit. The walls were lined with old crates and shipping containers, some of them rusted shut. And then, voices. Lily grabbed Riley's arm, pulling her behind a stack of crates. Two men stood near the far end of the warehouse. One of them was Calloway. The other was. Lily's breath caught. Officer Taylor. Her heart stopped. Riley tensed beside her. Told you he was dirty. Lily's hands shook with fury. She watched as Taylor handed Calloway something small, a flash drive. Lily's flash drive. The one they had stolen from the police station. Lily clenched her fists. We have to get that back. Riley smirked. Already ahead of you. Before Lily could stop her, Riley grabbed a rusted wrench from the ground and threw it across the room. Crash. The wrench hit a metal crate, sending a loud clang echoing through the warehouse. Calloway and Taylor spun around. What was that? Taylor muttered. Calloway's expression darkened. Find out. Taylor pulled out his gun and started moving toward the noise. Lily's pulse raced. Riley grabbed her arm. Move. They crept around the other side of the crates, staying low. Calloway was still standing near the table, and the flash drive was right there. Lily's breath quickened. This was her chance. She took a deep breath and ran. She darted forward, snatching the flash drive off the table before Calloway even knew what was happening. But the second her fingers closed around it, a hand grabbed her wrist. Her heart stopped. She looked up, straight into Calloway's cold, dark eyes. Well, he murmured. Look who finally decided to show up. Lily tried to yank away, but his grip was like iron. Calloway's smirk deepened. You've been causing me a lot of trouble, kid. Lily glared at him. trying to hide the panic rising in her chest. I'm just getting started. Calloway's grip tightened. That's too bad. And then, he pulled a gun. Lily's blood turned to ice. This was it. This was how it ended. She braced herself. But before Calloway could pull the trigger, a loud bang rang through the warehouse. Calloway jerked back, a look of shock flashing across his face. His grip on Lily loosened, and she saw it. The bullet hole in his shoulder. Someone had shot him. Lily turned, and her breath caught. Standing in the doorway, gun still raised, was Jesse. His hands were shaking, his face pale, but his eyes were locked onto Calloway with fierce determination. Jesse had just saved her life, but Calloway wasn't done yet. He clutched his bleeding shoulder, eyes burning with fury. "You," he snarled. And then, he reached for something behind him. Lily's breath caught. It wasn't over. Not yet. Calloway's hand shot behind his back. Lily's stomach twisted. He's reaching for another gun. Her instincts screamed at her to move. But before she could react, bang! Another gunshot rang out. Calloway staggered, his back slamming against the table. His eyes widened in shock as blood bloomed across his other shoulder. Lily gasped. Jesse stood frozen, his hands trembling around the gun. His chest rose and fell in rapid, panicked breaths. He had shot Calloway. Again. Calloway's knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, his face twisted in pain. His gun slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Silence filled the warehouse. Then, Jesse. Lily ran to him, grabbing his arm. His whole body was shaking, his knuckles white against the grip of the gun. His voice broke. His eyes darted to Calloway, then back to Lily. "I didn't mean to. I just..." Lily placed her hands on his shoulders. "It's okay," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "You saved my life." Jesse swallowed hard. His breathing was ragged. Riley stepped forward, eyeing Calloway's bleeding form on the ground. "Well, that went better than expected." Lily ignored her. She turned back to Calloway. He was still alive. His breaths were heavy, labored. Blood dripped onto the cold concrete beneath him. Lily knew this was her only chance. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Where is my dad?" she demanded. Calloway's lip curled. Even in pain, his arrogance didn't fade. Lily's hands clenched into fists. "Tell me the truth," she shouted. Calloway let out a slow, shaky chuckle. "You really think I'm going to hand you answers?" His voice was strained, but his smirk remained. Lily's jaw tightened. She looked around. Taylor was gone, probably ran the second things got messy. No one was coming to save Calloway. Lily had the upper hand. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper. "Listen to me. You can either tell me where my dad is." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the flash drive, holding it up, "or I hand this over to the feds and make sure every dirty little secret you've ever had gets exposed." Calloway's smirk faded. His eyes flicked to the flash drive. Lily saw it. The fear. For the first time, he wasn't the one in control. She pressed harder. "That's right. I know what's on here. You think you're untouchable? Let's see how powerful you are when the entire world knows what you've done." Calloway exhaled shakily. He was losing too much blood. Lily wasn't sure how much longer he'd stay conscious. Finally, his gaze met hers. And then, he said something that made her blood turn to ice. "He's not dead." Lily's breath stopped. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "What?" Calloway's smirk returned, weaker this time. "You heard me." His voice was hoarse. "Your father's alive." Lily felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Alive. Her dad was alive. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand more. "Where is he?" she choked out. Calloway gritted his teeth, shifting against the floor. "You want the truth, Rocket?" Lily stiffened. He called her Rocket, the same nickname her dad used. Her stomach flipped. Her dad had been here. With Calloway. Jesse stepped closer, his voice still shaky. "Just tell us where he is." Calloway let out a low chuckle. "It's too late." His eyes darkened. "You're in way over your head, kid." Lily's fingers dug into her palms. "No," she shook her head. "You're the one who's finished." Calloway's breath hitched. His fingers twitched slightly, as if trying to reach for something. Lily stepped back, watching him struggle. Then, sirens. Lily's heart leapt into her throat. Jesse's eyes widened. "We need to go." Riley cursed. Someone must have called them. Lily didn't move. Her mind was spinning. Her dad was alive, and Calloway knew where. She wasn't done yet, but they had no choice. The cops were coming. And if Taylor really was working for Calloway, that meant they weren't safe. Riley grabbed her arm. Come on. Lily hesitated for one last second, then turned and ran. They ran through the back of the warehouse, slipping through the cracks before the police cars arrived. Their lungs burned as they weaved through the shipping yard, past rusted cargo containers and piles of abandoned crates. When they finally stopped, they were near the edge of town, hidden in an alley. Jesse bent over, hands on his knees. I think we lost them. Lily barely heard him. Her hands were still shaking. Her dad was alive. She turned to Riley. We have to find him. Riley exhaled sharply. Yeah, no kidding. Jesse ran a hand through his hair. Calloway wasn't lying, was he? Lily bit her lip. I don't think so. Riley sighed. Then we need to figure out where he was keeping him. Lily's eyes drifted to the flash drive in her hand. Calloway was hiding something. And if her dad was still out there, this flash drive was the key to finding him. She looked up at Riley and Jesse, determination burning in her chest. We're going to figure this out, she said. Jesse nodded. Riley smirked. Then let's get to work. Lily took a deep breath. They weren't done yet. Not even close. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor of Riley's hideout, a rundown garage on the edge of town. A single flickering light bulb hung above them, casting long shadows on the cracked concrete. Jesse paced in the background, his fingers running anxiously through his hair, while Riley sat at an old desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard of a beat-up laptop. The flash drive lay between them. Everything they had been through, escaping Calloway, the police chase, Jesse firing a gun for the first time, it had all led to this moment. Lily's heart pounded as Riley inserted the flash drive into the laptop. A small window popped up. 2 files. One they already knew about, her dad's message. The other? The one Calloway didn't want them to see. Riley clicked on it. The screen filled with folders, each labeled with a name. Lily leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. Jesse frowned. What is this? Riley clicked on one of the folders. Inside were dozens of scanned documents, legal forms, contracts, letters, each one stamped with an official-looking seal. And then, a name jumped out at Lily. Her dad's name. Michael Carter. Lily's stomach twisted. She grabbed the laptop, scrolling quickly through the files. One document stood out. A transfer of ownership. A contract. Signed by her dad. And Calloway. Lily's blood ran cold. What is this? Jesse asked, looking over her shoulder. Riley's expression darkened. It looks like your dad owned something Calloway wanted. Lily's heart pounded. But my dad didn't own anything important. Riley gave her a look. Are you sure about that? Lily hesitated. Her dad had worked a normal job. He had never mentioned anything valuable. But something felt wrong. Why would Calloway have a contract with her dad if it wasn't important? Jesse scrolled down. Then, suddenly, he froze. Guys, he whispered. Look at this. Lily followed his gaze. At the very bottom of the document was a note. A handwritten message, scrawled in black ink. Lily's hands shook as she read it. If anything happens to me, the key is in the place we always go. Dad. Lily's breath hitched. Her dad had left her a message. Jesse leaned forward. What does that mean? Lily's heart pounded. She knew exactly what it meant. There was only one place she and her dad had always gone together. A place filled with laughter, warm memories, and the sound of rushing water. The lake, she whispered. Jesse frowned. The lake. Lily nodded. My dad and I used to go there all the time. We had a spot. Our secret place. If he hid something, that's where it would be. Riley shut the laptop. Then what are we waiting for? Lily exhaled sharply. They were going to the lake. And whatever they found there, it was going to change everything. The lake was eerily quiet at night. The moon reflected off the water's surface, casting silver streaks across the dark ripples. Tall trees loomed overhead, their shadows stretching toward the shoreline like long fingers. Lily, Jesse, and Riley stood at the edge of the dock. Jesse shivered. Okay, so where exactly is this secret spot? Lily scanned the area. Then, her eyes landed on the old wooden boathouse. There, she said, pointing. The boathouse had been abandoned for years. She and her dad used to sneak inside when it rained, sitting on the overturned rowboats and telling stories. If he had hidden something, it would be there. They moved carefully, stepping onto the rickety planks of the dock. The boathouse door was stuck, but Riley shoved it open with a grunt. The inside smelled like damp wood and lake water. Dust swirled in the air as they stepped inside. Lily's heart raced as she ran her fingers along the wooden walls, searching. Then, her fingers brushed against something cold. A small metal box. Lily's breath caught. "Here," she whispered. Jessie and Riley crowded around as she pulled the box free. It was locked with a rusted latch. Riley pulled out her knife, slipping it under the lock. With a sharp pop, it snapped open. Lily's hands shook as she lifted the lid. Inside was a key and a folded note. Lily's fingers trembled as she opened it. Her father's handwriting stared back at her. "Lily, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. But you can still find me. The key opens the truth. Follow it, and don't trust anyone. Be brave, Rocket." Lily's vision blurred with tears. Jessie sucked in a sharp breath. "The key opens what?" Lily turned the key over in her palm. It was small, made of heavy brass, and engraved with numbers. Riley peered over her shoulder. "That's a storage locker key." Lily's pulse spiked. Jessie frowned. "A storage locker? Where?" Lily turned the key over. At the bottom, a location was printed. A self-storage facility. Downtown. Lily wiped her eyes and steeled herself. Her dad had left this for her. It was the final clue. And if Calloway really hadn't killed him, then maybe, just maybe, her dad was still waiting to be found. She clenched the key in her fist. "We're going downtown." Riley smirked. "Let's go find your dad." Lily's heart pounded. This was it. They were closer than ever. But deep down, she knew, whatever was waiting in that storage unit, it wasn't just the truth. It was the final piece of the puzzle. And once they opened that door, there would be no turning back. Lily gripped the brass key tightly in her palm as they rode through the dark city streets on their bikes. The storage facility wasn't far, but the air was thick with tension, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Jessie rode beside her, his face tense. Riley was ahead, scanning the roads like she expected trouble. And maybe she was right. Because if Calloway knew about this key, he wouldn't just let them open that locker. Lily's heart pounded. She wasn't scared. She was ready. The storage facility was silent when they arrived. Rows of metal units stretched down long, dimly lit corridors. A single security camera blinked overhead. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic. Lily pulled out the key and checked the number. Unit 317. They walked carefully, the gravel crunching under their shoes. Jessie exhaled sharply. "This place gives me the creeps." Riley smirked. "That's the idea." Lily ignored them, focusing on the numbers on the doors. 315, 316, then 317. Lily's breath caught. This was it. Her fingers shook as she slid the key into the lock. Click. The door creaked open. Inside, it was pitch black. Riley pulled out a flashlight, shining it into the unit. Lily stepped inside first. The unit wasn't empty. There were boxes stacked in neat piles. A metal filing cabinet. An old duffel bag. Jessie frowned. "This is weird." Lily's heart pounded. Her dad had left this behind. She reached for the duffel bag first, unzipping it. Inside were stacks of documents, a worn leather notebook, and Lily's breath hitched. A gun. She stared at it, her stomach twisting. Her dad had never owned a gun. Why was it here? Riley picked up the notebook, flipping through it. "This is all Calloway's dirt." Jessie grabbed a stack of papers. "These look like financial records." His brows furrowed. "Wait, these aren't Calloway's. They belong to," he paused. "A company." Lily frowned. "What company?" Jessie squinted at the letterhead. "CNG Holdings." Riley stilled. Lily looked at her. "What?" Riley clenched her jaw. "That's not just a company. That's a front." Lily's pulse quickened. "For what?" Riley hesitated. Then she said something that made Lily's blood turn to ice. "It's a front for human trafficking." Lily felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. "No," she whispered. Jessie's eyes widened. "You're saying?" Riley nodded grimly. "Your dad didn't just find out something dangerous, Lily." She turned the paper toward them. "He found out Calloway wasn't just some criminal. He was running a network." Lily's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about Calloway. It was bigger. Much, much bigger. Jessie swallowed hard. "Wait. If your dad found this out, does that mean?" Lily's breath hitched. Her dad had been taken. Because he knew too much. Her fingers curled into fists. Riley kept flipping through the notebook. Then, suddenly, she stopped. Her face went pale. Lily frowned. "What?" Riley turned the notebook around. Lily's heart stopped. Because there, written in her father's handwriting, was a single line. "Calloway isn't in charge. He answers to someone else." Lily's vision blurred. There was someone above Calloway. Jessie let out a shaky breath. Who? Riley kept scanning the page. Then, she froze. Lily saw it too. At the bottom of the page, her father had written a name. One name. Cameron Graves. Lily's pulse thundered. She had never heard that name before. But deep down, she knew. Cameron Graves was the real puppet master. The one who had ordered her dad's disappearance. The one truly in charge. Lily's breathing came fast and sharp. We have to find him. Jessie looked uneasy. Lily, this is getting. I don't care. Her voice was firm. We're finishing this. Riley nodded. Agreed. Lily clenched her fists. Her dad was still out there. And Cameron Graves had the answers. This wasn't over. Not yet. And once they found him, it would be. Lily had never been more certain of anything in her life. Her dad was alive. And Cameron Graves had the answers. She clenched the key in her fist, her pulse steady despite the storm raging inside her. Jessie and Riley exchanged a look, and for the first time, neither of them tried to talk her out of it. They were all in. Riley pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I can track him. Lily frowned. How? Riley smirked. Let's just say I have connections. Jessie sighed. Of course you do. A few tense moments passed before Riley found something. She held up the phone. There's a private airstrip just outside of town, she said. It belongs to a shell company under Cameron Graves. She met Lily's eyes. If I were him and things were getting messy, I'd be running. Lily's stomach tightened. He was leaving, taking his secrets with him. Not if she could stop him. Let's go. The airstrip was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. A single plane sat on the tarmac, its engines humming softly in the night. A group of men in dark suits loaded cargo onto it, moving quickly, and standing near the stairs, barking orders. Was him. Cameron Graves. Lily's hands clenched at her sides. He didn't look like a criminal mastermind. He looked normal, short silver hair, an expensive suit, the kind of face that could blend into a crowd without a second glance. But Lily knew. This was the man who had torn her life apart, who had ordered her dad's disappearance. And she was going to end this. Jessie pulled her back behind a crate. Lily, we need a plan. Riley's eyes darted between the guards and the plane. We need a distraction. Lily thought fast. She looked at the fuel truck parked near the plane. An idea sparked in her mind. She turned to Jessie. Remember the fireworks from 4th of July? Jessie frowned. What? Lily grabbed a metal pipe and slammed it against the fuel truck's side. The alarm blared. Shouting erupted as the guards spun around, guns drawn. Riley grinned. Nice. The chaos gave them just enough time to move. Lily bolted toward the plane, her heart pounding. Graves turned, his sharp eyes locking onto her. For a moment, shock flickered across his face. Then, he smiled. Like he knew her. Like he had expected her. Lily skidded to a stop, Jessie and Riley at her side. Graves studied her, hands clasped behind his back. Michael Carter's daughter, he mused. I was wondering when you'd show up. Lily's fists clenched. Where's my dad? Graves tilted his head. That. He sighed. You're persistent. Just like him. Lily's pulse spiked. That confirmed it. Her dad was alive. Graves shook his head. Unfortunately, persistence is a dangerous trait. He raised a hand. The guards lifted their guns. Jessie grabbed Lily's arm. Lily, we need to. Boom. An explosion erupted behind them. Flames shot into the sky as the fuel truck caught fire, sending the guards scattering. Lily's breath hitched. Riley smirked. Told you I had connections. The distraction was all they needed. Lily lunged forward. She grabbed Graves by the collar, yanking him close. Where is my dad? Graves' smirk faltered. And then, a voice. Lily. She froze. Her hands shook. She turned and saw him, standing at the far edge of the tarmac. Disheveled. Weak. But alive. Her dad. Lily's vision blurred with tears. Dad. She ran. Her legs felt like they might give out, but she didn't stop. Her father caught her in a tight embrace, his arms wrapping around her like he never wanted to let go. Lily sobbed. She had found him. After everything, she had found him. Behind them, Graves cursed under his breath, his plan falling apart. But it was too late. The wail of sirens filled the air. The real police, the ones who weren't corrupt, stormed onto the airstrip. The moment they saw Graves and his men, they shouted orders. The guards dropped their weapons. Graves' smirk vanished. For the first time, he looked afraid. Lily watched as the officers grabbed him, shoving him to the ground. Justice. It was finally happening. Riley exhaled, crossing her arms. Well, that was satisfying. Jesse wiped his forehead. Never doing this again. Lily barely heard them. She clung to her father, her heart still racing. He was thinner, exhausted, but alive. He cupped her face, his eyes searching hers. You did this. His voice was weak, but full of awe. Lily nodded. Tears streamed down his face. My little rocket. Lily broke. She hugged him tighter, holding on to the moment like it might disappear. She had spent so long searching. And now, she was home. The aftermath was a blur. The police arrested Graves and his men. Calloway, still bleeding from Jesse's shots, was hauled away too. Lily's dad was taken to the hospital, where doctors confirmed he had been held captive for months, beaten, but never broken. Officer Taylor vanished before the police could arrest him. But it didn't matter. Lily had won. She, Jesse, and Riley sat outside the hospital later that night, watching the stars. Jesse nudged her. So, what now? Lily exhaled. She had spent so much time fighting, running, surviving. Now, she could breathe. She smiled. We live. Jesse chuckled. Yeah, I think I can handle that. Riley smirked. Guess I have to find a new hobby now. Lily looked up at the stars. Her dad was safe. Calloway and Graves were behind bars. And for the first time in forever, she wasn't afraid. She had been brave. She had fought for the truth. And she had won.